Structure is a critical part of creating a compelling musical journey, and never more so than if you're writing music for use in TV, film and ad placements. In this video, I'm going to take you into one of my projects and demonstrate exactly what I'm doing on a track-by-track basis to ensure that not only is my track optimized from a structural point of view, but making sure that I've got really clearly defined sections which make it as usable as possible for whoever's editing it. Stay tuned. Hi there, my name is Jim Hustwick from Larp Music. I'm a composer and a music producer. I write production music, and I've had the joy of writing for likes of EMI, BMG and Sony, but I also curate a catalogue for a publisher in the US, so I hear quite a lot of people's submissions for library. And if you've seen any of my other videos, including the 3 big reasons why tracks get rejected by publishers or music production libraries, it's because the structure isn't right. I am a stickler for structure, and structure is critical to making sure that your music is usable. But aside from, sync opportunities, think of it from a songwriting perspective. It's so important to get the structure right if you want to create a compelling musical journey for the listener and have them start and actually finish listening to the piece of music in its entirety. Take that into the realm of syncing music for TV and film, and you have to provide the editor with a toolbox, and the structure goes a long way to ensuring that you're delivering what is needed in order to not only make sure it works to picture, but then the editor has everything they need to tell their story. So in this video, rather than actually just talking about it, I'm going to take you into one of my projects and show you what I've been doing. It's a piece of Irish folk, but the principles I'm talking about are exactly the same no matter what genre you're working in. EDM, trap, grime, metal, cyber, death, disco, Japanese, techno, hardcore, whatever it is, the principles are the same. I just happen to be working on a bit of Irish folk, so I thought I'd show you. So let's have a look at the project and see what I mean. Okay, so here we are inside the mystical wonderland that is Logic. And as I mentioned, this is a short piece of, it's basically a jingle for a podcast called Hidden Island. It's only 30 seconds long, which means it's very easy to kind of demonstrate the sort of structural principles that I am referring to. And again, whilst this is Irish folk music, this has no bearing, these principles are the same irrespective of what genre of music you are producing. So before I sort of start talking about it, let me just sort of run it from the top so you can get a feel for what's happening. Okay, there you go. Nice and simple, which makes it easy to sort of demonstrate what I'm talking about. So you can see up here, I've divided it up into kind of my 3 sections. I've got an intro, I've got a main section, and I've got a call and response. Now, with this being such a short piece of music, I could quite easily have got away with just sending in 30 seconds of music, which was either, 1 section or 2 sections. But because I am the consummate professional and I always want to go above and beyond, I wanted to make sure that, I was delivering something which had the most use possible. And so what I've done is, like, every 4 bars, there is a shift, there is a change. So you'll hear on the intro, it's fairly sparse in terms of what's happening. We've got some mandolin percussion. We've got some baron, or I call it bodhran, but I think the pronunciation is baron. Some baron. The clicks are muted, they're not in. Then I've got 2 vocals. So this is basically lilting, which is kind of like a Gaelic form of singing. And it's me doing it. It's worth saying as well that this podcast, Hidden Island, it is a comedy podcast, so there is a bit of tongue-in-cheekness about with this lilting. But yeah, just to make sure when we're talking about lilting, we're not talking about the totally tropical kind. And then the last thing here is the violin, which is basically just doubling up the vocal melody. Again, that just provides a bit of Irish flavour, and also hides my vocals because I hate the sound of my own voice. So we've got a very simple intro, but we've got a hook, and it's also worth pointing out here, so whilst we have got a simple intro, I could have got away with maybe even less happening in the intro, but it's always important in my mind is when you start strong. if you've got enough elements in there to sort of keep the listener interested and sort of going, oh yeah, look, there's a baron, oh, there's some mandolin percussion, there's some lilting, oh, there's a harmony, oh, there's also some fiddle. That's the game we're in. We're keeping interest. We're keeping it interesting. So I've gone with, that selection there as a sort of good opening point. Then you'll notice a bar before the next section here. I've got sort of like a droning accordion sound. So the point of that is it just announces it's something. Again, you've got 4 bars, and then all of a sudden something new comes in, which sort of signals, oh, hang on a minute, something's going to happen. And then it does happen because we go into our main section. So the main section is, again, all of the original instruments except the vocals are still in there. But I've also added a kick drum. I've also added an upright bass. Crap MIDI sounding double bass, but it's kind of low in the mix and hidden, so it doesn't matter. I've got some additional percussion in the form of sort of clicks or clacks, which are on the side of the bodhrán. Baron. Then I've got some acoustic guitar. I've got 2 hard panned. Oh no, they're not hard panned. They are slightly panned, but not that panned. But again, acoustic guitars in sort of Irish folk music, whilst they are obviously providing a sort of harmonic backing, they are kind of, I suppose, primarily sort of almost percussive instruments. So they're sort of doing their thing. Then I've got some horrific MIDI accordion. You'll notice that that's very low in the mix because, again, it's not great MIDI. The samples aren't great. It's part of Contact. And if anyone has also seen the video that I've done on how to make MIDI more real, again, I'll link in the description below. What I've done to this MIDI, just to try and make it a little bit more passable, is I've added some retro color, which is basically kind of like taking off some of sort of the lower and higher frequencies, adding a bit of distortion and a little bit of wobble to kind of give it almost sort of kind of like a slightly more vintage sound. I've also added a bit of EQ, but then I've also added some Space Designer and just basically a 0.3 second reverb, just to push it back from the microphone a bit and put it into a space, because dry it sounds even worse than it does already. And then onto the main instrument, which is the fiddle. Obviously the fiddle is kind of the number one Irish instrument for Irish folk, so therefore I had to get a fiddle in. So there we go. So we've gone from a sort of like slightly more sparse intro, and then the next section is essentially clearly defined by just throwing in a load more instruments. So this is the transition. It's worth pointing out as well that, the upright bass and the kick drum, because there's no low end information in this intro, when this kicks in, we really notice it, and that is a great way to provide contrast between sections, because if one section doesn't have any low end information and then the next section does, the listener really feels that addition. So again, I could have then sort of looped that 4 bars round, 2 end, bish bash bosh, but because I like to over deliver, I've sort of gone in with a completely different section at the end. Now you'll notice that the section at the end, in terms of the instruments chosen, it's pretty much all the same instrumentation. But what I've done is I've chosen a harmonic shift. So rather than pedaling between a D and a G or a D and a C, can't remember which, I'm now going to an A and a D. And that, again, just provides a sense of shift. Even though the instrumentation's the same, harmonically something has changed, and so it feels like this. And also what I've done in the end section is, again, rather than just having the violin playing non-stop, I've kind of decided this was just a sort of to do a call and response, I suppose. You've got violin number 1 sort of playing something, and then this second violin here, which is panned over to the right. You see this one here is over to the left, this one over to the right. Again, just providing a call and response, just sort of shifting across the stereo spectrum, just to sort of mix it up, just to sort of change it and make it a bit different. There's also a third violin in here doing, I can't even remember what it's doing, just some percussive. Yeah, just pedaling on that one note, but it's just underneath the other 2 violins to add sort of like a bit of action. And the other thing, again, I'll point out is, so like in this preceding section here, we've got our 3 bars. In this 4th bar, we've kind of got a little bit of a turnaround. So which, again, that turnaround, like this accordion, indicates to the listener, oops, something's going to happen, something's going to change. do, 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 do. So again, it's just sort of building in these little elements. Whilst the 4-bar section is there, there's a little bit of an announcement at the end of that 4-bar section that something's going to change. Bang, it does. So what I've delivered is I've got 3 independent sections, which could just, if I wanted to loop one of those sections independently and leave it playing on its own, it would work. If they wanted to I've also delivered stems. So if they want to take out just the baron part, or just the guitars, or just the fiddle, they can use that. But they can edit this. They've got clearly defined edit points. They've got clear sections which they can use and cut to. And again, with an editor, when you've got that change from one section to another, bang, you've got a clearly defined edit point, which helps them, whatever shift in narrative or shift in visual that they're working with, your music can work with that and reflect it at the same time. It's also something I want to point out is the choice of making sure that I had a fiddle in there. I'd allowed budget in my costing because when you're doing any kind of world music or folk music, it lives and dies by the quality of the players, and there is just not a MIDI fiddle out there that could come close to doing what this guy Roberts did with this track. So real fiddle had to be in there. It was just a non-negotiable in order to give it that traditional Irish feel. The other thing to mention is that the baron, whilst initially there was no budget for baron, I decided to get the baron in, and it's this guy called Kieran Leonard who does remote percussion. He's based in Dublin, a phenomenal player, and I'll leave a link to his website below. So if you ever do need sort of remote percussion, Kieran's your man. But again, that just percussively, it sets stall out. The 2 main instruments in that track are baron and violin. They're real. Even though there is a little bit of sort of crap MIDI in there, they're real. So predominantly this track sounds like it's, hopefully sounds like there's a load of guys playing in a pub. But those elements are critical to making this work, because I even sort of looked at, there was some baron samples. I think Native Instruments do some. I looked at getting some of those in, but again, it was never going to be as good as having, an Irish folk player playing a baron. So there you go. Hopefully that kind of goes somewhere to clarifying structure. We're looking at this in sort of 4-bar sections over the period of 30 seconds, but if you to extract this out over a kind of 3-minute piece of music, again, with clearly identifiable sections, clear shifts, but obviously each section would be longer, and you've got to find ways of making that interesting. So if you've got any questions, or if there's anything that's not clear, then let me know in the comments below. If you've got anything else you'd like to add, then again, by all means, let me know in the comments below. And please do give it a thumbs up and a like, because it goes some way to telling YouTube that this video is useful, and so that others may enjoy it as you have. So yeah, thanks very much for listening, and keep making music.